Chapter 1071 The Grand Stratagem. With the arrival of Vibrant and her crew, who'd made the difficult trek from the Mother Tree's portal to arrive in the new mountain nest, the situation below ground stabilized rapidly. Just like their leader, the 10,000 ants who follow in her footsteps specialize in speed, which isn't the most useful thing down in the tunnels, but they find ways to make it work. They want space to best employ their greatest advantage, which meant the wide open plains of the third stratum had been the perfect battleground for them, and Vibrant had been super busy. Rushing from one pillar to the next, putting out fires, joining sieges, roaming the plains and sweeping up huge numbers of evolving demons. Down here, they use whatever space they can find, rushing along the walls and ceilings in dizzying loops. Watching them charge into a tunnel is almost like watching a horizontal ant tornado. All right, it's rest time, I declare cheerfully to Solent and her crew. The 20 of them are still standing, but only just. After hour upon hour of non-stop movement, fighting and eating, they are well and truly done for the day. Hang on a sec, I said we're going to go rest, so chill out already. The shadows, which had been steadily deepening around us, begin to recede once more. I swear I see an antenna pop out of the darkness and wave an apology. Did they really think they could swoop in and grab my student right in front of me? I appreciate the dedication, but I'm not going to let them get away with skipping torpor. That's the only time I get a break. Go find yourselves a spot in a barrack somewhere. I'll come and find you in 8 hours. You better have some interesting strategies cooked up by then, Solent. I'm keen to hear what you've been churning over in that brain of yours. When the exhausted ants toddle away, I turn to Chrysalis, Tiny and Invidia. You three need to keep fighting. I know you have all the biomass and cores you need, but you're still short on levels. The sooner you three get to tier 7, the happier I'll be. Down here in the 4th, there's all sorts of crazy monsters, and sky snakes, and whatever that weird dinosaur thing was. So you need to evolve. Go and get some levels. A thumbs up from Tiny, a long, slow blink from Invidia and a reluctant peeling from my carapace from Chrysalis. Soon enough, the three of them split up and head down different tunnels. With them helping alongside Vibrant's army, things should settle down under the nest, at least for a while. If there's one thing I've learned about the waves, they only get worse until the moment they finish. With everyone else dealt with, it's time to do the most important work of all, snooze. I've been working hard, damn it. I deserve a little open eye. I find a nice, secluded chamber, and in moments, I dip into sweet torpor. WAC camo, I'm up, time to round up the troops. It isn't hard to locate Solent, thanks to the vestibule. So far, she's been the easiest of the champions to deal with. At least she isn't trying to escape all the time. Or running off at full speed. Wait a second, have all the champions been fleeing from me most of the time? What a shocking realization. Not so with Solent, though. Along with her crew, they are looking bright-eyed and shiny carapaced, ready for another day of brutal and intense warfare. How are we, squad? I greet them with gusto. We're heading back down into the tunnels today, but this time, Solent is going to be in charge of the plan. I will, of course. That's your speciality, your raise indeed ray. Or whatever. When we get down there, I want you to lay out the plan of attack. Our objective is to hold a tunnel for a few hours along with the troops there. In the best way you can think of. You'll all be fighting too, so keep that in mind. They really are a tight-knit and supportive group. As we march down into the bowels of the nest, the 20 of them constantly discuss and strategize, bouncing ideas off each other, critiquing and providing constructive feedback. Solent doesn't contribute much, but she's always paying attention, absorbing every idea they bounce around and absorbing it into her own calculations. When we reach the staging point, I arrive just in time to see Victor vanish into a pool of shadow. The rest of the generals in the command center don't react at all to the sudden abduction of their leader, but instead seamlessly flow into a new command structure, carrying on with the business of ensuring the nest's security. So I guess we pick our own tunnel. Down this way, I lead my 20 charges. Several hundred meters from the front, I stop the procession and turn to face Solent. All right then, what's the plan? I have a few ideas I want to try. Gather around, I might sketch out a few things on the floor. Her team skitters closer as I loom overhead, looking down. The vector of the enemy's approach is predictable, which is a massive advantage. I feel it isn't being properly utilized. I also feel like a rapid rotation of fighters will help prolong our combat effectiveness. Our goal is to swap in and out of combat every 15 seconds, which will mean we need to utilize some adjusted formations. Spacing will be key. She keeps scratching away in the dirt, drawing lines, little symbols, arrows, swirls as she keeps talking, and talking, and talking. The rest of her squad are nodding thoughtfully, absent-mindedly cleaning their antennae as they absorb the plan, but I'm rapidly running into an issue. This plan is so damn detailed. I can't remember any of it. Chapter 1072 Eldest Emergency. What to do? Do I tell them I can't remember the plan? Would that impact my dignity as the eldest? Maybe I'll just play along and hope for the best. What's the worst that could go wrong? Do we all understand? Of course. No problem. Simple. Ellipsis dot. It's straightforward. I like it. I declare with every scrap of confidence I can muster. I'll leave it to you to coordinate with the generals at the front. I understand. Solent is all business, solemn and serious as she goes about plying her particular trade. When we arrive, she goes straight to the generals and begins an in-depth conversation about what she wants to do that I immediately lose track of, but they seem to follow okay. Following that, she moves around the resting troops, ensuring they understand what to do, drawing little diagrams and even running a few drills until she's happy that they'll move the way she wants them to. The entire time, all I hear in my mind is static. This is a problem. Before I can work out what on Pangara I'm going to do, I run out of time. Standing on the front line as the soldiers, scouts, mages and healers ahead of me prepare to fall back, I still have absolutely no idea what I'm meant to be doing. This could go poorly. My dignity. Eldest, if you'll lead the way, Solent says. Oh, of course. What does that mean? Lead the way literally, as in, move forward at the head of the troops. Or do we start with an acid barrage? She talked about acid, I'm sure of it. Or magic. Was I supposed to deploy my domain, or a gravity well? I don't know. Tentatively, I take a few steps forward, and when nobody corrects me I take a few more. The troops behind me begin to shuffle forward and I gain a little confidence. I creep forward a bit more. They creep along behind me. All right, good so far, but now I'm worried that I'm moving too slowly, or is it too quickly? Do I stop now? Paralyzed with indecision, I just keep scuttling forward until the ants fighting ahead of me turn and retreat, rushing past me in a blur as the ravenous monsters behind them chase close behind. Now what? Do I strike? My mandibles flex, ready to unleash a powerful chomp, but I hesitate. Would that ruin the plan? I don't want to unravel the strategy. The whole point of this exercise is to train Solent and let her practice her ideas. Alright, I won't bite. Maybe I should unleash some gravity magic, slow the enemy down for the rest of the ants to deal with. That's helpful, right? But what if they're counting on me not doing that? Damn it, this is giving me a headache. The monsters are almost on top of me now, what am I supposed to do? Too hesitant to make a move, I do the only thing I can think of. I tuck my legs under my body, bury my head in the rock and accept my fate. If I can't decide what I should do, then I shall do nothing. Clearly, this is the best course of action. Instantly, the monsters begin to batter at my carapace. Claws scratch, teeth scrape, blows rain down on me ceaselessly. Protected by my absurdly tough, compressed diamond carapace, reinforced by the plating beneath and constantly regenerating, I take very little damage. As the seconds tick by and my health slowly trickles down, I feel a little more calm knowing that I won't get instantly annihilated at least. I can feel the ants engaging the enemy around me, acid fills the air, a non-trivial amount of it landing on me, but I can't really blame them for that, given my size. If any ant has acid tough enough to eat through my carapace, I'd love to meet them. In fact, it's possible a nice acid wash will give my exterior an even more impressive shine. Still, the gnawing feeling that I'm doing something wrong continues to eat away at me, and every second, I question whether or not I should stick my head out and do something. Oof, I feel like a mountain just collapsed on me. What the heck? Judging by the mana I can feel, an earth elemental just clobbered me with one of its boulders, hard enough to create some cracking in my shell. Lousy sentient collection of rocks. I trigger my healing gland immediately, rapidly repairing the damage. This close to so many ants, the energy flowing through the vestibule will refill the healing gland in a minute. Realistically, I could sit here all day and probably survive just fine, provided nothing too strong found its way up the tunnels. I can't help but feel like I've failed in this instance. I should have just confessed I didn't understand the plan, not allowed my stupid pride to shut my pheromone gland and prevent me from speaking out. Is it really so shameful if I need a barely hatched ant to walk me step by step through what they need me to do? Yes it is. Miserable, I park myself like a turtle in its shell and let the enemy pound on my carapace for almost half an hour, triggering my healing gland whenever necessary to mend the damage the constant barrage causes. Finally, the call blessedly comes. Retreat. Someone else's turn to step up to the front. Thank goodness. I push myself off the ground and vent my rage at the monsters in front of me with an empowered void chomp, shattering everything within range before I turn and trundle back behind the defensive line with the rest of the troops. I'm embarrassed, frankly, deeply embarrassed, but there's only one thing to do. I need to ant up and face the music. If the eldest can't apologize for making a mistake, then what sort of message does that send to the rest of the colony? That I'm above them? That's nonsense. Just about every ant in the family is more capable than me. I walk up to Solent and her group. As they debrief each other, discussing the battle in detail. Look, Solent, I'm S. Ah, well done, eldest. I wasn't sure if you'd be willing to take such an undignified role in the plan, but your dedication and humility is an inspiration to the colony. Drawn in by your core and highly mutated biomass, the enemy was blinded to everything else. The strategy worked flawlessly thanks to your selflessness. SSS super happy to help out. You can rely on me anytime. Chapter 1073 Revisions. The colony rapidly became a formidable fighting force once they had gained sapience. Under the leadership of the eldest, who stamped out some of the more self-destructive ant impulses quickly, a doctrine of safety first, conservative generalship was settled as the norm. Using our natural affinity for digging and construction, defensive battle styles in which we were able to grind down our enemies and preserve our numbers were adopted. Siege warfare utilized a similar approach, with armies of ants building enormous structures from which to launch assaults in safety. In pitch battle, however, we relied on our superiority of numbers and the quality of our troops to win the day. Everything changed with the emergence of Solent. Adaptive tactics, deception, lightning-fast assaults on fortified defensive positions, in the area of attack, specifically, she brought something the colony had never even considered before. And just in time. Excerpt from The Warfare of the Colony, by Historiant. It turns out that Solent's plan wasn't actually that difficult to grasp, certainly not my role within it. I'd told her that the reason the monsters spawned by the wave attacked the nest is because they could sense what an enormous and juicy pile of resources we are. The reason we don't close off the nest as much as possible is to accelerate our growth. So she figured she'd replicate the strategy in miniature. She plopped an irresistibly tasty treat on the table in front of the monsters and when they inevitably swarmed me, desperate to crack my outer shell and enjoy the tasty insides, they'd been even easier pickings for the rest of the ants than normal. All of the fancy diagrams and drills were the other layer of her strategy, rapid rotations. Even that was relatively simple to grasp. She wanted to rotate the fighters more rapidly, something the colony doesn't like to do since there's inherent danger in turning your back on the monsters in front of you. But if everyone coordinates carefully, it's possible. She succeeded by having everyone form 4 identical ranks layered one behind the other and doing a neat sidestep overstep move, where one group stepped to the side to make space and then back, while the ranks behind climbed over them as they retreated. Each group fought for a minute before they were rotated for the group behind, moved to the back and then had 3 minutes of rest before they'd have to fight again. It's the kind of detailed tactic that's only possible with a well-coordinated group who act all on the same page, but with Solent coordinating the battle, everything becomes that much simpler. As a champion, ants are drawn to follow her, believing in her and trusting she can lead them almost instinctively. The other part is her unique outlook, evolutionary choices and skill set. With her view of the battlefield, she can see problems before they happen, stepping in and coordinating plugs for holes that nobody else can see. I get a much clearer picture of this over the course of the next few battles. We use the same strategy, but this time, I try to keep my wits about me rather than turtling up into a miserable ball. With my antennae carefully positioned, I listen in on the exchanges between the ants as the fighting rages. And Solent is a constant, and I do mean constant presence. Positioned just behind the front rank, she ceaselessly communicates with her troops, identifying dangers, picking up on anyone out of position, micromanaging the ants behind her to ensure they're healed, rested and ready to rejoin the fray. She's like the boss, the secretary and the accountant all rolled into one. She has the vision, the details and the practical application to make it all happen. One curious tidbit I pick up on is that the amount of time she has to spend managing the members of her own squad is vastly less than it is for everyone else. I'm guessing that despite not being together for that long, all things considered, after training and fighting together, they've already adapted to her way of doing things and can anticipate what she wants or how she would react. This gives me an insight to what her eventual army will look like, an entire fighting force who thinks like she does. This would dramatically reduce the amount of time and energy she would need to spend on controlling every aspect of a fight and allow her to focus more on bigger picture items. When we retreat again, I make a point of chasing down a few ants to speak with. I'm not going to pretend I'm smart enough to know if her ideas are working well or not. I mean, it seems fine, but wouldn't everything work well if you have me sitting out in front taking the beating for the rest of the ants? Hey, you got a second? I ask the healer in charge of medical care in this tunnel, Fixant. No, think you can make some time then? No, great. I wanted to ask if you think these rapid rotation tactics are helping lighten the load for the healers. The healer sighs, her antennae drooping. It's hard to tell considering you're the one taking the most damage and we don't have to heal you at all. We've had very little to do during the shifts you're out there. Good point. All right then, time to take the training wheels off. Solent, you're going out there without me next time. I want to see how you go without me helping. Chapter 1074 Training Ground. The eldest had laid down the challenge and Solent could feel the pressure immediately. Someone like her, not even a full graduate of the Antacademy, was to be put in charge of a battlefield during a wave. Only the authority of the eldest made something like this possible. The defenders of the nest put their faith in their strongest member and trusted that Solent would not fail them. The pressure was immense. Clearly, the eldest intended to put her and her broodmates directly into the fire, the only place the strongest steel could be forged. The weight of responsibility settled on her carapace immediately, a crushing weight that threatened to drive even the mana from her core. She welcomed it. More than that, she relished it. I am grateful to the eldest, she told her precious sisters as they gathered in their chamber after torpor. Either we are right in what we do and how we do it, or we are wrong. If we are wrong, let us fail now, before too much damage can be done. If we are right, then let us succeed, and lead the family to victory. The others listened solemnly, fully aware of what was riding on their performance in battle that day. We're with you, Leonidant assured her. All the way, of course. There's no such thing as a general, unless there is an army. Two parts of a single whole. When they emerged from the chamber, they found the eldest and the three guardians waiting for them. Ready for the big day? The eldest asked, looming over them without trying to. Of course, Solent confirmed, no hint of wavering in her scent. Good, you're in charge, lead the way. A little taken aback at the thought of leading the eldest anywhere in the nest, Solent nevertheless stepped forward and marched to the center of the enormous staging chamber, in which the gathered generals administered the never-ending defensive battle. Hordes of ants swarmed everywhere, rushing in and out of the dozens of tunnels that led from this one central hub. Some were returning to rest, others shifting from one field of engagement to another. The priorities under the nest changed from minute to minute, depending on what dreadful creatures emerged from the depths. Luckily, Vibrant and her army were still in attendance. With their unmatched speed, they could leap from one hotspot to another, the best relief force in the entire colony. I will take command of the A3 tunnel for the next 12 hours, Solent announced to the frazzled Victor, who sat surrounded by messengers and generals on all sides. What? The general shouted, then noticed the eldest looming in the back. Oh, fine, go quickly and don't make any mistakes. We're hard pressed down here and it'll be tough to cover for you. Don't worry, we will achieve victory. After announcing this, the little general turned and led her procession to the tunnel scent marked as A3. She had led the troops in this segment before and hopefully they remembered her preferred arrangements. When she arrived, she immediately made contact with the general in charge of the tunnel. I've been instructed to take command of the tunnel for the next 12 hours, she announced to the far larger and more experienced general. The ant sized her up in an instant. I remember you. The changeover is happening in 2 hours. I'll inform the other generals, you should go talk to the troops. Thank you. Solent snapped out a quick salute with her antennae which was returned before the two generals went their separate ways. Seemingly uninterested by the minutiae of leadership, the eldest moved to one side of the tunnel and flopped down with the three guardians beside them. It hurt her heart to see the strongest fighting force of the colony doing nothing, but then she shook her head. The eldest is here for you, she reminded herself. If they don't think it's a waste of time, then it isn't. With her broodmates around her, Solent took the time to speak to all of the troops waiting for their turn on the front line. She needed to check in with the healers, the soldiers, the scouts, the mages and the core shapers and cover her ideas in detail, especially since there would be changes this time around. You mean the eldest isn't going to let the monsters attack their carapace? One of the larger and stronger soldiers asked. That's right, Solent nodded, before she stepped forward and prodded the Tier 6 soldier with one antenna, which means we are going to get some work out of you this time. Good. I was starting to worry I was getting lazy. We have formation practice in an hour, she informed them. We need to go over the rapid rotation and the new maneuver, which I call tea and biscuits. Sounds delicious. It's meant to. With the authority of the eldest and the certain knowledge that nothing could go too wrong so long as the strongest ant in the colony was standing behind them, the ants were more than happy to go along with whatever Solent had to say. Well before they were due to fight, she had them running exhausting drills, doing everything she could to prepare her troops for the trials to come. She was everywhere, picking up on every tiny mistake and correcting it on the spot. If a soldier put a leg out of place, or a mage mistimed their spell, or a healer was too slow to rotate, Solent would appear like magic, patiently explaining what had gone wrong and what the result would be in battle were the error to be replicated. Battles were won on the training ground. This was another core tenet of Solent's philosophy, and she wished she had far more time to ingrain even these simple formations into her troops, but that wasn't how things had shaken out and she made her peace with that. Before too long, it was time to rotate and replace the troops battling hard on the front line. With her excitement bottled tightly deep within her thorax, Solent led her first army to the battlefield, nothing but victory in her eyes. Chapter 1075 Leader. As they drew closer to the front, the endless roars of monsters grew deafening until Solent's antennae were vibrating from the force of it. Her general's eye crackled into life the closer they got to the field, her intuition and mutations blending together to give her an almost supernatural sense for the battlefield. The ants were tired, which was to be expected. They moved sluggishly, taking more damage than they should, and attacked without sharpness, inflicting less punishment on the enemy than they were capable of. This was a compounding problem that led to more damage being taken and more ground lost as the shifts dragged on. Of course, the colony could simply rotate the ants more often, but that introduced more problems than it solved. Logistically, shifting hundreds of thousands of ants around was a nightmare already, doing it more often would just compound the issue. Despite the huge numbers of ants inside the nest, there was far more fighting taking place than any of the leadership had expected. The tunnels beneath the nest were absurdly extensive, as if a tunnel network the size of the entire first stratum had been bolted onto the bottom of the mountain. The absurd number and size of monsters appearing out of the waters had also taken the colony by surprise, drawing their resources even thinner. Solent would need her current group of troops to hold at the front for 4 hours before they would be relieved by the next shift. In another 2 hours' time, she would arrange for the incoming ants to go through the same drills the current group had under the leadership of her sisters, since she wouldn't leave the front. Get ready to charge, she announced calmly as the massive soldiers and scouts clacked their mandibles eagerly. She watched the fighting ahead with her intense gaze, waiting for the perfect moment. The monsters surged, the ants reared back, and she had found the timing. Charge, she said. Her troops rushed forward, covering half of the tunnel surface as they ran. The thousands of ants already fighting saw their approach and the general in charge coordinated the retreat. Acid and magic blast, go! She roared and the exhausted troops gave everything they had left to beat back the monsters and give them the separation they needed to retreat. It was a delicate moment, and Solent watched carefully as the current shift began to compress their formation and fall back. An almost bizarre sight, like two fluids moving in opposite directions through a single pipe, took place as the retreating ants crushed into one side flowed back to safety while Solent and her fresh army pushed forward, towards the enemy. Snap into place and brace, she instructed the soldiers in front and they knew exactly what to do. Right at the front of the formation, Solent had picked the exact moment the retreating line of soldiers had passed them and had her own reform the line, covering the entire ring of the tunnel's surface. The soldiers rushed into position and braced themselves, ready to receive the deadly charge of the monsters ahead. That charge came swift and brutal. Larger and stronger than what the colony had fought higher in the dungeon, the beasts of the fourth were fewer in number, but much harder to deal with. An enormous, elongated caterpillar squirmed towards them, acid rolling from its body and sizzling on the rocks below. The soldiers received its charge, ignoring the pain as the burning liquid splashed on their carapace. With their enormous heads and reinforced mandibles, they latched onto the beast, halting its momentum and tearing at its soft flesh as the rest of the formation took shape behind them. Hold, Solent informed them, 10 seconds. It was important not to rush, despite the danger to the soldiers on the front. If the rest of the troops were sloppily arranged and asked to engage before they were ready, it could upset the flow of battle for the next several minutes. She would gladly allow an extra few seconds to ensure that didn't happen. Step back on the left. Push forward. You're not in line, watch your flanks. A steady flow of calm commands rolled from her pheromone gland to the struggling soldiers, helping them to hold the line and avoid the worst of the acid until, finally, the defensive position had been established. Fire on my command, Solent ordered, waiting a beat, then, fire. Scout acid and magic blast slammed into the caterpillar's face, sending the monster reeling back. Again on my command, fire. The moment it regained its balance, the beast was hit again. It screeched in fury and retreated slightly. An opening. Advance 10 meters, Solent snapped. Already an opportunity to move the line forward had appeared, she wouldn't say no. Ground taken now could be freely given later, when her troops were more fatigued. Moving as one entity, the entire force of thousands of ants surged forward 10 meters and re-engaged the caterpillar, seizing on its weakness and putting it down. With a moment of respite, the beast was dragged to the back of the formation. Valuable biomass that would help heal and refuel the army. The first minute had passed. Rotate, Solent ordered. Step, step, dash. Just like that, the frontline troops swapped over. The first wave of soldiers moved to the back of the line where they were fed and received medical care while a fresh group replaced them. The same occurred behind them, as mages and scouts repeated the move, their accompanying generals holding position at the front of the formation. Just in time, more monsters were coming. Chapter 1076 Gravity. Solent felt as if her mind was balanced on a mandible's edge. She saw everything that occurred and her mind catalogued every event, filing them, ordering them, and then she responded to each in turn as best she could. Minute by minute, her 4 groups rotated through, regardless of the conditions at the front. The ravenous, unthinking beasts of the wave weren't watching or analyzing their movements, and so didn't anticipate or take advantage of the minute openings in her tidy formation the maneuver created, as a disciplined and thinking opponent would. Adjust the tactics to suit the opponent. There was no such thing as a universal strategy. Another of her idioms. The monsters of the wave were crazed, desperate and savage, throwing themselves against her defensive position over and over again. Many times, she was forced to give ground, only to claw it back later. Fortunately, she didn't have to employ her new move until the troops had settled into a good rhythm. From around the corner, Solent spotted a new threat approaching. A shimmering turtle, almost the same size as the eldest, glimmering with energy that rolled from it in waves. Her front line was currently occupied with a pack of ape-like creatures that could summon clouds to obscure their bodies and even phase themselves into the mist. Hard push, she ordered, starting in 10 seconds. The energy and mana available to her troops was a resource that had to be carefully managed, but she ordered them to spend it. 10 seconds later, a barrage of fire burned away the cloud and apes alike, allowing the soldiers to latch onto the struggling monsters and bring them down. Rotate, she ordered, not missing a beat and allowing her formation the few seconds necessary to switch. Forward, huddled just behind the front line of soldiers, she had a good view of the monsters approaching down the tunnel, and at this moment the giant turtle was the only thing coming. She wanted a little extra room to work with as they engaged the beast. Tea and biscuits in 10 seconds. A moment of hesitation rippled through the troops, a result of their lack of familiarity with the tactic. The ants began to respond, urged by her broodmates amongst their ranks, and Solent picked up the slack, issuing incisive orders. The turtle represented exactly the kind of opponent the colony was struggling with in the 4th. Too tough for them to bring down efficiently, resulting in their lines being pushed in, the troops exhausted and vulnerable to whatever came next. Having them fruitlessly flail against the eldest's undefeatable carapace while everyone else poured on damage was one option, but was probably the least effective use of that particular individual's talents. Tea and biscuits was a new attempt at implementing an old strategy. Each second that passed, the monster loomed closer and Solent prepared to engage her stratagem. The turtle crashed closer, closer still. Now, she snapped. Several things happened at once. The front line drew back, while 2 scouts slid in behind her and seized hold of her back legs. Once she felt that contact, Solent threw herself forward and rotated to land on her back. Oh no, she cried, though it was unlikely the turtle could smell pheromones. It's a disaster. Then she waggled her 4 free legs helplessly. Not many ants had enjoyed successive special evolutions as she had. In fact, vanishingly few had that privilege compared to the enormous numbers of the colony. Could she compare to the delicious 10-course meal that the eldest represented? Not even remotely, but she was, at the very least, a delectable snack. Tea and biscuits. Enraged and unthinking, the turtle lunged for her, its hooked maw open wide, but the scouts dashed away like lightning, dragging the general with them. Of course, they didn't go too far. Solent remained, waggling her legs helplessly, just out of the monster's reach. Furious at being denied, the turtle pushed itself up again and rumbled forward, its jaws gnashing with hunger and rage. The scouts kept Solent just out of reach as they lured the turtle deeper and deeper. And then the trap was sprung. While being focused on the helpless little treat in front of it, the monster had been lured deep into the ant formation and was now surrounded on all sides. Attack, Solent ordered. 3/4 of her force descended on the beast, striking at its flanks, its tail, from underneath and above, while the last division once again sealed the tunnel and defended it from whatever may come next. With only 25% of their force dedicated to holding the tunnel, the ants knew they were in a race against the clock to defeat the turtle and so threw everything they had at it, reserving nothing in an effort to bring it down. Solent watched with satisfaction as it eventually fell. Fighting it head-on would have been difficult, to say the least, exhausting her forces. Since these maddened monsters were so easy to deceive, it seemed a waste to fail to take advantage of it, luring them into even more unfavored ground than they were in already. It wasn't as if the plan was without risks, but it could certainly be changed to add layers of safety. It wasn't even necessary to dangle an ant as bait, as she had done. With some time and preparation, a sufficiently large core could be used to lure the beasts deeper into the ant nest where they could be crushed from all sides. Reform the line, Solent demanded. The formation must be established in 10 seconds. Go. As the front line held on, the rest of the army scrambled to fall in behind them, and soon enough, they resumed their rotations, the little general managing the entire field of battle like clockwork. Chapter 1077 Recovery and Analysis. I watched the battle unfold with a keen interest, using all of the senses at my disposal to follow the goings-on. As large as I am, it wasn't really practical for me to shove myself forward and block up the tunnel. I'd destroy the formation I was trying to inspect. So I fall back on my more esoteric options, such as the vestibule. Despite what Solent may think, tracking one ant's flow of will through the glittering organ isn't nearly the same as mind reading. It's not even like I'm following the path of their thoughts. More like, I'm getting a stream of consciousness flow of their wants and goals. It's will, after all, not thoughts. This is why it can be so difficult for me to separate myself from the will of the colony at times. When 100,000 or more individuals all want the same thing, all willing for it to occur, that becomes a very difficult impulse for me to resist. At any rate, the battle is traveling extremely smoothly, which pleases me. What Solent needs to grow and develop as a champion is very different than what the last two needed. As a general, there's only one way for her to improve, and that's to be out and about generaling. And she needs to be in charge of her own battles, because putting her under the regular generals will just stifle her creativity. The troops continue to rotate every 4 hours, including the little general's broodmates, coming in and out of the front with the rest of the troops, but Solent remains at the coalface, working her little thorax off until the very last minute. When the full 12-hour shift is done, she comes back along with the last set of troops, exhausted but clearly pleased with herself. "You look happy. It all went well then?" I ask. She considers seriously before replying, as is her habit. "It went satisfactorily," she demurs. "There are many areas I can still improve, and with more time to work with the troops, I'm sure we can reach a much higher level of performance." "I wouldn't worry about that too much," I mutter, watching the ants stroll past. After being exposed to the unique charisma of a champion, there's no doubt this lot will be all too happy to join the eventual army that will form around Solent. She'll have all the time she needs to whip them into shape. Regardless, you'll be back here tomorrow, and every day for the next week, for that matter. You've got to continue to develop your skills and ideas, and the only way I know to make you do that is to shove you into battles over and over again. Don't worry, though, I'll be hanging around the whole time, so things can't go all that wrong. Rest assured, this is absolutely not a scheme to get more rest and relaxation for myself. Not at all, so you should just go back and get some rest. I continue, you must be exhausted after 12 hours of directing the fighting. Solent looks at me like I'm crazy. I've got 4 hours left before mandatory torpor and an almost unlimited number of things to do before tomorrow. What about the review, or the brainstorm discussion? 5 items of improvement. We need to drill, at least 4 rounds of drills. I have 100 formation adjustments I want to make, and a list of things to discuss with the core shapers. But, rest. I guess, you go for it. I'll be over here if you need me, I suppose. Not needing any further encouragement, Solent speeds off to gather her faithful and loyal 19 broodmates together for an intense session of antennae thwopping and waggling. After 30 minutes of this, they rush off to gather the off-duty shifts, and soon enough, I'm treated to the sight of the little general running the ants through their paces. It looks tiring. When the heck is she going to be done? She said she had 4 hours until her mandatory torpor, and she uses every little bit of it to keep training with the troops until her time runs out. Before the shadows can begin to materialize, she sprints back to her resting chamber along with the rest of her sisters, and I'm sure they waste no time getting themselves to sleep. For my part, I stand and stretch. I've got an 8-hour break from babysitting, so I might as well go and make myself useful. Come on, you three. Let's go and fight something. I don't think I'll need you tomorrow, so you may as well stay out and get some levels. Are you sure, Master? Chrysalis is clearly reluctant. Yes, I'm sure. If I could, I'd tell you to stay out until you reached max level. No, she clings to my carapace and I swear I feel my organs constrict. Better not to think about it. Go on, get. I shoo the blob of endless nightmares away, and she reluctantly peels herself off my carapace and vanishes into the shadows. Tiny is long gone at this point, Nvidia drifting along behind him. At their current level of evolution, they're stronger than any ant out there, with the possible exception of Vibrant, and me, obviously, but when they evolve again, some new powerhouses will be introduced to the family. I can hardly wait. Chapter 1078 Old Dogs, Old Tricks. Titus took another deep, slow breath, feeling the mana thunder through his body, tearing away at him from the inside. The conflict was never ending. Much like the wave that ravaged his world, the raw arcane energy that permeated the dungeon poured into him and sought to rend his flesh. How long had it been since he'd sustained himself this deep? Before his children had been born. He'd been a much younger man then, in body and mind. In those days, he'd relished the struggle to master himself, to harness the power that pulsed in the veins of his post-baptism body. Now, he simply endured, patiently waiting as his condition slowly adapted to this new normal. You look miserable, Minerva observed from somewhere nearby. The commander kept his eyes closed. This is my normal face, he said. I know. He felt a sharp poke on his forehead, but didn't react, controlling his breathing instead. He'd learned a long time ago that the best way to annoy his fire-breathing monster of a wife was to simply not react. Sure enough, after he maintained his routine for another minute, he received a quick paff to the top of his head. How can you sit there all day? Minerva grumped. If you don't move soon you're going to grow moss. Unlike some, who were relaxing deep in the dungeon, I've spent the bulk of the last 20 years on the surface, darling wife, and I need time to adapt to these conditions. I feel like a highly qualified officer in the Legion would have known that before she dragged me down here in the first place. What cheek, she harumphed, giving him another soft thwap on the head which he barely felt. If she wanted him to feel it, then he surely would. At least the famed berserker had learned some restraint over her. Tenure as consul, I'm just impatient to see you in action again. You must be getting bored being cooped up in this adaptation chamber all day every day. Are you sorry I brought you down here? At her words, he opened his eyes finally and saw she was looking genuinely apologetic. He was taken aback slightly. Have you gone soft? He demanded. No, this just isn't the romantic getaway I'd been hoping for. He wasn't quite sure if she was joking. It was entirely possible that Minerva did consider the two of them returning to the dungeon's depths to fight against the most deadly monsters a legionary could face as a romantic getaway. It was how they'd spent the early years of their marriage, after all. No need to get your Praetorian armor in a twist. I think I'm pretty much ready to go. Despite all the time they'd been together, it still moved him to see her eyes light up. Really? Finally, she latched onto his arm and began to try and drag him from his seat. Well, what are we waiting for? Time to suit up. Let's go, let's go. Titus did his best to prevent his wife from dragging him out of the chamber. Hold on a minute, Minerva. Wait, damn you, what now? She demanded, turning back to look at him. I need to get dressed. After that, I need to report to command. After that, I need to speak to the armory. After that, I need to acclimate to the suit. There's a laundry list of things I need to do before I can sortie and fight. Not all of us can jump into Praetorian armor after a 10-year break without batting an eye. Not my fault you can't handle it, she huffed. Nobody said it was. Attempting to keep up with Minerva was a waste of time, even though she didn't see it that way. If he wanted to do his duty and perform as well as he knew he could, then he would take his time and do things by the book. If he ran out there now, he was just as likely to chop his own foot off. Minerva had arranged for his old Praetorian suit to be delivered here, And once upon a time, that armor had been just as comfortable as his own skin, but it had been near 20 years since he'd been inside it. Slow and steady was his way. Fine, fine, his wife gave in, have it your way. I guess I'll go sortie and cut something to pieces to relieve some stress. Good luck, dearest, he chuckled before he pulled her in for a quick, one-armed hug. I'll be out there soon enough, don't you worry. If I perform too badly, they'll wonder why you ever married me. They'd never dare. Her eyes flashed before she stepped out of the chamber and rushed off to the armory. Idly, he wondered if there was even a group heading out, or if it mattered. It was hard to say no to a former consul, let alone that one. The commander flexed his hands, slowly closing them into fists and then relaxing them again. He'd not been exposed to this much mana since, he couldn't remember. Had there ever been a time when the density had been this high? This series of waves, which had begun just before the discovery of that ant colony, showed no signs of stopping. Would it ever end? Chapter 1079 Old Dogs, Old Tricks Part 2. Engineer Griner. Titus rumbled. That'd be me. You must be the commander. The burly, sleeveless man said as he turned from the enormous armored suit he'd been working on. Titus rolled his shoulders. Just about everyone down here is a commander, or higher, he noted wryly, so why would I be the commander? Griner shrugged. I don't make the rules. Turns out when you command successfully down here and up there, people take notice. Some in the Legion thought that the soldiers stationed in the deep looked down on those fighting high in the dungeon, but that was far from the truth. Legionaries in these depths relied on the plentiful mana, powerful techniques and equipment it enabled to fight. In the first stratum, they would be helpless. Titus, as fine, Engineer Griner. Now, I'm told you're the man who's been taking care of the old girl. How is she? The two turned and looked up at the intimidating suit of Praetorian armor looming over them. At 8 meters tall, the suit wasn't close to the largest the Legion could field, but the added bulk of thick armor certainly meant it was on the heavier side. Without a weapon or shield, the suit looked undressed, but still presented an intimidating visage. Brought across the chest, with thick pauldrons at the shoulders and the Legionum Abbaci emblem engraved on the front. The decorative touches around the edges of the plates imbued it with a tangible sense of gravitas. I won't say she's as good as new. I've given it the once over, and, mechanically, she's as sound as can be. What about the mana circuits? We've had those inspected as well. She's been through a lot over the years, been assigned to 2 others after you left. Didn't do nearly as well, but serviceable enough. Lot of wear and tear is what I'm trying to say, I guess. But she's functional, ready to deploy, ready as she'll ever be. Without ripping out the core and rebuilding the damn suit from scratch, we aren't going to be able to do better than this. It won't be too much longer before the old girl needs to be decommissioned, but for now, she's clear to fight. Titus nodded gratefully, reaching out a hand to press against the cold, abyssal iron plating. Indomitable. It had been his Praetorian suit for almost 10 years. Seeing it now was hard to describe, like an old friend, or pet, that he'd never really thought he would meet again. No point in delaying. Can you help get it ready? I want to try a test run. Sure thing, Commander. Commander again. He rolled his eyes. He hoped whoever had the misfortune to take over his last command was having more luck with the troops than he was. The 2 men were alone in the armory. Unsurprising, given so many of the bays were empty at the moment. Clearly, Minerva had been in luck and there was a fight going on somewhere. Of the 20 open bays that held the Praetorian suits, all but 3 were empty. Dim, silver light glowered from overhead, gleaming off the polished metal of Indomitable as Titus moved to the back and began to climb up the suit. He definitely had a few more twinges in his shoulders than the last time he'd done this, but it didn't overly matter. In short order, he reached the shoulders and triggered the mechanism to open the suit. Immediately, the back armor fell away as the head rose up, creating a gap for him to slip inside. Go on in and get yourself comfortable. I'll hook up the liquid mana once you are ready, Griner called up. Thanks, Titus acknowledged. Carefully, he slipped inside the enormous metal suit, closing the opening behind him. When the metal clanged shut, followed by the audible click as it locked and sealed, he became enveloped in total darkness. It didn't matter. He'd spent so long inside this suit, he could find what he needed without light. He stretched out his arms, finding the panels and grips that he sought, wrapping his thick fingers around them. He settled his feet, pressing them into the paddles below, feeling them mold to the shape of his toes. He leaned forward, pressing his face into the mask, the matrix that melded his consciousness with the armor. He tsked. Whoever was in the suit last had been a touch shorter than him, he'd need to adjust the angle. A hollow clang rang from the side of the armor. "You ready in there?" came a muffled voice. "Ready," Titus replied. He tensed, but had to wait a few long moments before the sudden deluge began. The liquid mana burned like ice, froze like fire and forced pure arcane power into his veins. He gasped at the touch of it, then grit his teeth against the pain as the hollow inside of the suit began to fill from his feet up. It was agonizing. His body, which had barely become adapted to the level of mana he was exposed to at this depth, was flooded with more, stretching him to the point of bursting. He endured. When it reached his waist, he called out, "That's enough." And the flow, which had been running down his back, slowed to a trickle, then stopped. "I've disconnected the hose," he heard from outside. "Try walking around." "All right then, Titus," he muttered to himself through gritted teeth, "let's see if you can remember how to do this." Without delaying any further, he pressed his face to the mask and felt his consciousness get sucked from his body and suffused with dark, cold iron. Chapter 1080 Old Dogs, Old Tricks Part 3. "Wipe that grin off your face," Titus muttered. "What grin?" "That grin. It's unprofessional. The troops expect a little more decorum from a consul." "I'm not consul anymore," Minerva responded, "so if I want to express my happiness, then I will." Titus rolled his eyes. A small part of him had hoped that the dignity Minerva had cultivated in the highest office in the Legion would have rubbed off on her, but alas, it did not appear to be the case. The moment she was freed from the responsibilities, pomp and ceremony attached to the role, she had reverted back to her more relaxed ways. Part of him loved her for that, the part that viewed her as his wife and the mother of his children. The part of him famed for its iron disciplinarianism found it endlessly frustrating. She got away with it due to being one of the best fighters ever to pull on a suit of legionary armor. "Fine, just make sure you're sharp when we get out there," he growled. She rolled her eyes. "You're telling me to make sure I'm sharp? You haven't sortied in 2 decades. I was out yesterday. That's why you'll need to make sure you're in the right frame of mind to pick up the slack. It's only the 2 of us going out, isn't it?" "That's right. I'll be counting on you to cover for my lapses then." "I'll be in your hands, Commander." He snapped out a brisk salute and got punched in the arm for his trouble. "So what else is new?" Minerva grinned. "Go jump into your old bucket of bolts and I'll meet you out there." "Bucket of bolts," he sputtered. The Indomitable might have seen better days, but it certainly didn't deserve to be disparaged like that. "I prefer to call it reliable and battle-tested," he said sagely, but Minerva wasn't listening, already having jogged down the armory toward her own suit of Praetorian armor. Unlike him, who had requested his old gear, Minerva had been more than happy to jump into a new Berserker model. Adaptability was simply another of her strengths. "Heading out for real this time?" Engineer Griner noted as he started to help Titus prep. A last-second check over the armor, ensuring there were no obvious flaws, as well as a quick look over Titus himself. Exposure to the sort of mana levels that were needed to operate the Praetorian suits could have a devastating effect on a soldier, and the signs could appear out of nowhere. When everything was cleared, Titus nodded in thanks and climbed up the back of the suit, sliding inside and closing it behind him. After a few moments to acclimate, he knocked on the side with his knuckles and moments later felt the burning cold of liquid mana running down his back and rising from between his toes. A mix of nerves and anticipation rose in Titus, as he felt the power rushing through his veins. Many times during the long years he had spent on the surface, he had yearned for this, but now that the moment was here, he felt a little trepidation. There was no help for it, though. He was committed. Not for the first time, he wondered why Minerva had used her authority to drag him back down here. Was it really just because she yearned for the good old days, the 2 of them fighting shoulder to shoulder in the depths? Or was there something else that she wanted? Titus was under no illusions that he would be able to perform as well as he could in his prime. He may have gained a great deal of experience and levels since the last time he'd fought this deep, but very little of that was relevant to the type of combat engaged down here. The vast majority of the soldiers he met in the mess or passed in the halls were younger and hungrier than he. Deep down, he hoped he would still be useful. As the liquid mana reached his neck, he knocked on the side and the flow reduced to a trickle and then stopped. After several deep breaths, he pressed his face to the plate and submerged his consciousness into the metal. The Indomitable came alive as the will of the commander suffused it. The right hand of the armor reached out to grasp the enormous metal axe standing beside it, Titus' own weapon embedded in a slot on its side. The demon contained within raged within the larger, abyssal iron weapon, thirsting for violence and blood. With the left, the armor grasped hold of a weighty shield, embossed with filigree and the emblem of the Legion. Titus took a few steps to steady himself, then braced his weapons and moved to exit the armory. Again, most of the suits were already out, having sortied several hours ago, and Titus felt glad that he would no longer be taking up space without doing his share of the fighting. When he reached the exit, the port was already down, revealing Minerva's berserker suit waiting for him outside. "About time," she remarked, twirling her twin blades in her armored hands. "I was about to go hunting without you. Then what would be the point of dragging me down here?" Titus growled as he stomped out of the armory and down onto the ground. Immediately, his eyes were treated to a sight he'd not seen for many years. Glittering caverns of sparkling steel, molten iron that ran like rivers, trees of shimmering diamond, and above all, the oppressive weight that pressed against him. "Welcome back to the 7th, darling," Minerva teased.